So I just played through the recently released Crisis Core Reunion, the remaster of the Final Fantasy VII prequel Crisis Core. Now, like Final Fantasy XIII, this is a Final Fantasy that I've never played before, but it is one that did come across my life around the time it came out because my sister got it. She was more of a Final Fantasy person back then, and she wouldn't shut up about how Zack returns to the planet, and I was like
I give a shit.
Now, 15 years later, I finally got the opportunity to experience the game for myself through this remaster, and I was telling my sister, oh my god, Zack returns to the planet, and she was like,
Not interested.
what? Anyway, so Crisis Core is set 7 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII. Our main hero is Zack Fair, a soldier working for Shinra, so this time around we're experiencing a story through the perspective of the power company instead of Avalanche, more specifically the soldier branch, and what I love about that is it really emphasizes how not everyone working for Shinra are dicks. Shinra as a corporation, they're dicks, but not everyone involved in the company are dicks themselves. That's just how the world kinda works, and I'm not just talking about Zack. There's a good number of other characters from Shinra that we see to be genuinely good people. Like we see Sung, the leader of the Turks, to be a much more compassionate character as we're now playing as someone who's considered his ally. You even gotta humanize Sephiroth. Before he went mad over the flawed knowledge of his birth, he was actually someone who cared for people, especially his companions. Like there's a certain part in the game where the Shinra armies mobilize to eliminate a few of Zack and Sephiroth's comrades that have gone rogue, and Sephiroth tells Zack, hey, don't worry, we're gonna find them first and fail to eliminate them.
For real?
Yes, for real.
Awesome! We're gonna fail!
It shows that these are human beings who would act at their own discretion sometimes to watch out for their colleagues, even if it goes against their company's wishes. Now, the main antagonist of this game is Genesis Rhapsodus, an individual who was born out of the Genova Project along with a few others, but was deemed a flawed creation. He was also a fellow soldier who one day sustained a wound from a training exercise which never healed due to his tainted birth, and he began to slowly die of degradation. As a result, he forms an alliance with Dr. Hollander, a former Shinra scientist who claims to be able to cure him, but is really just using Genesis as a weapon to wage war on Shinra, having a personal vendetta against the company. So that's essentially what Zack and his comrades are dealing with, which includes his mentor Angeal, Sephiroth, the Turks, and an innocent, timid Cloud who's a Shinra trooper. That's great. That threw me off because I was so used to him being a badass edgelord. Anyway, before we get into the gameplay, I want to briefly talk about the voice acting for Zack. As you may already know, everyone has made fun of it for how not great it is.
What? Seriously? This is bad. Run for it! And what?
Personally, I don't think it's that bad. I understand the hate. I think it's noticeably bad whenever Zack is being dramatic or serious.
What the hell did you do, Angeal? Is that your idea of honor?
With that aside though, I think this voice works during any other circumstance because Zack's a dorky character, which I never imagined him to be. As Cloud's mentor, I always thought he'd be more stern like Angeal, his own mentor figure. But no, Zack is super dorky, always talking about wanting to be a hero.
What is your dream? To become first? Is it?
No. To become a hero. Sephiroth? The hero? Wow! I'm gonna meet a hero! If we pull this off, we'll all be heroes.
So, Zack, what is your dream?
Huh? Oh. Let's see. To become a hero!
Alright, now let's finally get into the combat. So for most of 2022, I've been playing older FF titles with combat systems that are all on the slower side, and even though I've enjoyed some a lot more than others, none of them were able to sate my taste in combat. But this? Ooh. I like this. It's a real-time action-based system. You got your attack, guard, dodge button. Nothing revolutionary or even outstanding in the style of combat, but it's the kind of system that I like. It took me a bit to adjust to it though. Battles did feel kinda clunky initially for the reason that once Zack is far enough into his basic attack combo, he goes into this animation that can't be cancelled to dodge or guard when you command him to. Because of that, I was constantly taking hits from enemies even though I was seeing their telegraphed attacks, and sometimes attacks come in so fast there's no time to react to them at all. That was slightly bothering me, but I eventually worked these issues out and realized that the trick is to essentially pre-dodge or pre-block. Combat more often has you anticipating attacks than react to them. In other words, you have to dodge or guard by instinct. It does help to pay attention to enemies' behaviors and notice how many hits you can get in before they decide to strike back. Typically it's about 2 to 3, which is perfect since Zack doesn't enter into his vulnerable animation until his 4th strike. So my playstyle after this realization was to slash the enemy 2 or 3 times, then roll to the side, and repeat until I prevail. It just didn't make battles flow very smoothly at times, especially when enemies are less predictable. Sometimes I would just roll away from enemies when I didn't need to, and it just gives some battles an odd pace to it. But this is more of a nitpick, nothing close to being a deal breaker, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning. Now, like any other Final Fantasy VII title, you can equip a certain number of materia to Zack, giving him the ability to cast various spells. In order to use them, you hold the L1 shoulder button, which opens up a shortcut menu to your abilities, making them very accessible. You can even chain your basic attacks together in tandem with your spells. In turn, combat is quick, efficient, and clean. Zack also does this thing where he hops back before he casts a spell, which I noticed can be used as a slick method to dodge an enemy's attack. Like in this clip here, I casted Fireagra right before this monster was about to lunge at me, so Zack not only backed away from it, but also countered with the spell.
Awesome!
An additional element that spices up battles is the digital mind wave, also referred as a DMW. It's a slot machine that constantly runs in the top left corner of the screen during combat, in which it will eventually stop on a random selection of 3 character images. Depending on the results, you'll be granted random buffs and bonuses such as having unlimited MP for a short period of time, or the ability to perform various limit breaks. For instance, if the slot machine stops on 3 Aeriths, you will be able to activate the Healing Wind ability, which I found to be one of the most useful limit breaks because it fully recovers your health, mana, and gives you a temporary invincibility buff. I like to activate it right before a boss was about to use a special attack on me, so I would take no damage from it. To quickly note, you are given an opportunity to interrupt enemy special abilities in this game, if not mitigate the amount of damage it does, which is also a neat feature in contrast to having to just take it. But as the game went on, I found that more difficult to do, so Healing Wind was my go-to course of action. I couldn't rely on it every time though, due to the lottery system being completely random, but that's what I love about it. It makes battles more dynamic, less predictable, and repetitive. Speaking of repetitive though, random encounters are a thing in this game, which I didn't mind too much because I like the combat, but even so, it did manage to slightly bother me in dungeon-like areas where quite a bit of backtracking was involved, so I had to fight enemies spawning in the exact same spots. And anyone who plays through this game will have this particular phrase seared into their brain, and that phrase being
activating combat mode. Activating combat mode. Activating combat mode. Activating combat mode. Activating combat. Activating combat. Activating. Activating.
Shut up!
Shut
up! I'm warning you!
Activating combat mode. Conflict resolved. Conflict resolved. Conflict resolved. Conflict resolved. Conflict.
So that's the combat. Not really much else to discuss in the gameplay department. This is a rather straightforward linear experience where battles take up about 95% of the gameplay, and a good chunk of that 95% are the 300 monster slaying side missions that can be accessed through save points. There are a few chapters where we get to take a look at Zack's life outside of work that aren't so combat heavy. During his free time, he's usually spending time with his girl Aerith, and those are my favorite sections. When I'm playing story-driven games, it's not the action that I enjoy the most, it's the slower, endearing moments where the characters are just hanging out. I loved it in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I love it almost as much here. I just found it kinda annoying how there's a section where Zack and Aerith are tracking down this kid who pickpocketed Zack's wallet, and they kept losing him within this tiny market.
There he is! Hey, mister! That's him! Get him! He got away! Where did he go? There he is! Hey, mister! That's him! Get him!
Whoa, whoa! This kid's pretty fast.
Hey, what's the deal? He's gone.
Yeah, I want to point out, Zack absolutely sucks at chasing people down. The game's opening depicts him as this enhanced super soldier who can run like 100 miles an hour, but during the game, he can't catch anybody to save his life. There's a particular point in the story where he struggles to chase down Dr. Hollander, just this regular old scientist dude. He can't catch little Yuffie who keeps snatching his hard-earned treasure.
Now, where's that treasure? Ah, found it! What? Seriously? She got me.
Bro, run after her. What the f are you doing?
Whoa! Not again! Little brat.
Okay, so for the rest of the video, I'm just gonna talk some spoilers for the back half of the story. As I said, I don't have much to say gameplay wise, as this is a more simplistic game where it's mostly battles as you're going through the campaign with some exceptional mini games sprinkled here and there. So if you don't want spoilers, you can skip to this time to hear my quick final thoughts if you want to. If not, I guess I'll see ya. Alright, so eventually our villain Genesis grows impatient with Dr. Hollander's lack of results in stopping his degradation, so he breaks his alliance with them and decides to look for the Genova cells as a possible cure, targeting Mako reactors to find them, and there happens to be one in...
By the way, where are we going?
To Nibelheim.
Yes, the infamous Nibelheim operation where Sephiroth loses his sanity. So as Sephiroth and Zack investigate the Mako reactor in Nibelheim, they find a tank labeled Genova, which is strange because that's the name of Sephiroth's mother who supposedly died not too long after he was born. Then Genesis shows up and reveals to Sephiroth that they are both monsters created by Shinra from the Genova experiments. As a result, he asks Sephiroth to share his genetic material with him to cure his degradation, but Sephiroth doesn't swing that way. He then goes through a bunch of files within the basement of the Shinra mansion to confirm if what Genesis told him was true, and comes to the conclusion that he is indeed different. A monster born to simply be a weapon, and the fact that his origins were never disclosed to him both shocks and upsets him.
Leave me be. Leave me be. Leave me be. Leave me be. Leave me.
1 week later.
Sephiroth snaps and burns Nibelheim to the ground, killing most of the population. I gotta say, it was more tragic experiencing this event with this game's context, because this time around, it's not just the incident of Sephiroth turning towards madness, but also the downfall of the great war hero. Like I mentioned earlier, this game conveys that Sephiroth was genuinely a good guy. There were certain missions he'd refuse to go on just to avoid the possibility of having to fight old friends. When arriving at Nibelheim, he told his men to feel free to visit friends and family, knowing that this was some of their hometown. But most importantly, he was our friend, our comrade, which made it kinda sad to see him eventually turn against us. And of course, Zack doesn't stand a chance against someone like Sephiroth by himself, so Cloud steps in to help out and he stabs him in the back like a coward.
How dare you?
Sephiroth is more offended than anything else and is like, "Get the fuck out of here, bitch!" And while Cloud's on the floor, Sephiroth stabs him with a sword and lifts him up like how you'd use a picker pin to pick up trash.
I've got skills.
That's true actually, because Cloud manages to pull a Uno reverse card by grabbing the blade he's impaled with and lifts Sephiroth back like they're on a seesaw. Cloud then tosses Sephiroth into the livestream, setting up for his return in Final Fantasy VII as the main antagonist. By the way, Sephiroth could have just let go of his sword here. I don't know why he just kept holding onto it, but whatever. Anyway, Zack and Cloud pass out from their fight with Sephiroth. Shinra eventually shows up to cover up this whole incident, which also means getting rid of Zack and Cloud. Their unconscious bodies are taken by Professor Hojo, the head of Shinra's science department, for his experiment of creating Sephiroth clones, but they are deemed failures and left lying asleep in a tank within the basement of the Shinra mansion. Zack manages to wake up and escape out of his tank, taking Cloud with them, now making them fugitives. He then goes to find Genesis for a final confrontation with them, which to me didn't come across as a priority for Zack at this point since he's now being targeted by Shinra. But of course, you gotta wrap up this character's story arc. So in the end, Genesis is able to cure his degradation by absorbing the power of the goddess Materia, which is a concept that was never really brought up until now.
I thought the cells were the gift.
There are various interpretations.
I don't understand.
Yeah, this whole sequence kinda felt like an afterthought, but now that Genesis' body is healed, he wishes to challenge Zack to a final duel to restore his honor as soldier. Despite being defeated, of course, his pride is still considered regained, his desires are fulfilled, and he passes out with content. With Genesis dealt with once and for all, Zack soon after discovers that him and Cloud were actually asleep in their tanks for 4 years.
4 years?
So he's like,
I had a date.
because before he left for Nibelheim, he told Aerith,
Yeah, but I want to go. I want to try.
Okay. After my next job is done, we'll go.
Really?
Yes. I promise.
Thank you, Zack.
Am I crying? No, I'm not crying. You're crying.
So he takes Cloud and rushes back to Midgar to meet up with Aerith while still being pursued by Shinra. Realizing that Zack is still out there, Sung mobilizes his team to find Zack and Cloud before the Shinra army does, and he specifically says, "Help them. I have letters for Zack." 88 of them. They're all from Aerith. She was trying to reach him through his colleagues, and this further reinforces how not all Shinra people are assholes. Similar to Sephiroth earlier in the game, Sung is like, Shinra, I'm gonna try to save my friend because I'm a human being and he's also got a girl waiting for him. But unfortunately, the Shinra army beat the Turks to it. They catch Zack just outside of Midgar, but not before he tucks Cloud away behind some rocks. This is Zack's final stand. He gives a valiant effort, but in the end, he's just one guy with the big sword taking on at least 100 soldiers with guns, so...
Come and get it!
Okay, I should probably give the scene a little more respect because it is an emotional one. No, Zack does fight valiantly. The game has you continuously fight off waves of soldiers, and even though this is a final battle, there's no epic battle theme. It's the price of freedom. A more somber track, and as you're fending off these troopers, various glimpses of Zack's more happy memories with all his companions throughout this adventure are triggered through the digital mind wave. The lottery mechanic within the battle system, and I love when games do that. Integrate their mechanics into the story. This is a mechanic that has been with us throughout the entire game, and now it's going away along with our main protagonist. It reaches a point where Zack becomes so exhausted he can barely move or swing his sword. It's so painful to play through, even more so when he ultimately gets gunned down. Once the army leaves, Cloud, finally beginning to recover, crawls out to a dying Zack, and like his mentor before him, Zack passes down the Buster Sword to Cloud and tells him to be his living legacy, to carry on his honor and dreams, and there you have Cloud's origin story, the birth of the Edgelord. The story concludes with Cloud dragging the Buster Sword with him as he wandered towards Midgar while Zack heads into the livestream. Credits roll. We then get an epilogue recreating the opening of Final Fantasy VII, a short scene with Aerith, then a zoom out shot of Midgar, and finally, of course, Cloud on top of a train getting ready for his first bombing mission with Avalanche. To be continued in Final Fantasy VII. Bravo. This was for the most part brilliant. From my eyes, this whole story further highlights the sinister nature of Shinra. Nearly every central character of Final Fantasy VII has been negatively affected by the company, whether that's Sephiroth losing his humanity, although that's also on him, Cloud and Tifa having their hometown get destroyed along with their families, or Zack slowly losing each one of his comrades before passing himself. The thing is that Zack wasn't just working for Shinra, he was mostly dealing with problems that originated out of the company. Like Dr. Hollander. He was just some petty employee using Genesis, a product of Shinra's experiments, to destroy the company. Nothing to do with Zack on a personal level, and when he came across dark secrets about Shinra while on the job, they immediately turned against him. How easily disposable he was to them despite being so loyal is what makes the situation so harrowing. Even though Zack earned the title of a hero as he desired, this was never a story of a hero taking on some big baddie. It just follows a guy who faces a series of unfortunate challenges as someone who's involved with a tyrannical corporation. And despite how hopeless things become, he never loses his positive spirit. It's so beautifully tragic. After finishing this game, all I could say was, I love the 7th universe. It's got a great world with beautifully written characters. I definitely see why it gets so much expanded material. Getting to hear Cloud's and Aerith's voice again did take me back to 7 Remake at times, which was such a fun experience for me. It wasn't my first Final Fantasy, but it was the Final Fantasy that made me want more Final Fantasy, and I cannot wait for Rebirth. I know 16 is the next entry we're getting this summer, and even though that game is looking quite promising itself with the latest Revenge trailer, it's difficult to look forward to it more than something that has already established itself. On the topic of Crisis Core though, this is the type of game I like. Fast-paced combat with solid storytelling and lovable characters. I ate this game up. Never felt like I needed to take a break from it, which is something I cannot say for any of the entries I played since the 13 trilogy. Not to mention the game's short and sweet. It takes about 10 to 15 hours if you're solely tackling the main story, which is also what I prefer. A solidly crafted 10 to 15 hour game rather than a 40 to 50 where like half of it is fluff. I'd say this is a must play for anyone currently keeping up with Final Fantasy, especially now that it's available on pretty much any platform, and with the 7 universe being more relevant than ever with the remake series going on. All in all, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is a great appetizer for what Square has in store for the future. Until then, I'll try to continue tackling the older titles. Emphasis on try. I've only got turn-based games left to work with at this point. A good number of people have told me to play 9, so that might be the one I'll go with. With that said, thanks for watching as always. I will see you next time. Later.